Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we've got ourselves a track from an act named Nirvana titled Breed, and if we switch over to here we've got ourselves a track on the screen here. On YouTube this is the audio for it. Now I'm aware that there is a live performance of this live at the Paramount 1991. I'm just sort of cautious about the fact that that could be copyright blocked with some of these bands that came through in like the 90s and stuff like that. Some of the labels are kind of a little bit they're very kind of, no, you can't show the video. The audio is usually fine, but the video is another thing entirely. So I'm using their website's actual kind of audio. This may defeat the purpose, but I can always cover it up with album art considering that the visualizer is basically the same. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. I should know going into it that this is my favorite Nirvana track, but let's go, let's do it. So probably a bit of bias, but Just had to turn it up a little bit. Such a filthy distortion though. Very vocal fry. Filthiness of those beams on the bass as well, man. I never realized the leads did that, man. Sick. Interesting track. I'm going to just take a quick look over the lyrics just so I understand what they're about before we go talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion, my review of this track from an act named Nirvana titled Breed. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally, my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? So I'm currently on the Breed page here on Genius. Kurt Cobain originally titled Breed as Imodium after Tad Doyle's diarrhea medicine suggests the running on of the mouth. This track was most likely inspired by Kurt's breakup with Toby Vale. Lyrics. Verse. I don't care if it's old, I don't mind, don't have a mind. Get away from your home, I'm afraid, ghost. Even if you have, even if you need, I don't mean to stare, we don't have to breed. We could plant a house, we could build a trailer, we could double three. So I presume that this is potentially talking about Toby Vale. So is this basically her perspective for most of it? Is that it? Good. Okay, interesting. So they just kind of repeat the verse for this entire time. Yeah, again, I can't make this bigger. It will not go bigger. Genius is just like that. He personally described Breed as getting into middle America, marrying at 18, getting pregnant, stuck with a baby, and not wanting it. So if we take that to mind, that we're more discussing the perspective of just having a life, having a baby, you know, growing a house, building a tree, etc. This track appears to be maybe almost a cathartic experience for Kurt Cobain getting the stuff off his chest. You know, like discussing this person that they are with and realizing what they did and didn't want. Realizing they didn't want a baby after all. Or, you know, like, I think it's an interesting sort of tale. I've listened to Nirvana stuff and not always understood what it was about, primarily because either I haven't had the full context of the lyrics, or sometimes, to be fair, the lyrics are just a little bit obscure, you know? One of those, for example, being Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know? But ultimately, I think if we take what Genius and Kurt said about the track, let's just take that as it is. Vocals from Kurt are wonderful. They sound so cynical and fiery and pessimistic, angry, like agitated. There's just so much behind it that it is almost like a release for Kurt. And I just think that is testament to their ability both to approach that technique as a vocalist, but also to be able to express themselves in a way where they connect with the subject matter like that. I think that's where some of the best music comes from. We hit the notes cleanly, we're comfortable on the microphone, we have a quiet charisma to us, which is ironic considering how loud it is. And ultimately, I like the vocal fry, I like the sort of clean sung parts. Ultimately, he handles himself well. And I think just this story, when you consider the story, there's kind of a quirky, weird sense of humor behind it, but ultimately a lot of it is kind of intense, and I just appreciate how multifaceted it is and that things are well connected. Structurally, this track has, you know, verses and choruses, that hella sick intro section with the drum fill, the kind of like riffs there. And you just have that feedback from the guitars at the start, you know. There's just this menace, like how it's just on the right side of the stereo field there. And you just have that filthy, I've said filthy a lot, this kind of gruesome sounding guitar tone there that is so grunge, but at the same time, it's almost kind of like noisy at the same time, where it's almost about the distortion as opposed to necessarily trying to be about the riff or the notes that are being played. You've got the tightness of that drum fill that comes up with, I think, Dave Grohl, if I'm not mistaken. He's on the drums for this. And then when you have the entire band come in around the 25-second mark, you've just got this really fast, quick track that just kind of barrels forward. If I'm honest, listening to this is going to be a highly contentious opinion, and I understand and respect completely if you don't agree with it. I do prefer OTEP's cover of this to the original, but that's because I just feel like this was as heavy as Nirvana wanted to go in the 90s, and then just how visceral OTEP's cover was just I prefer the kind of furor of that. I prefer just how much more kind of intense that is. But that's also because I like my chug chugs. That's not taken away from the fact that the cover had brilliant source material. So when I listen to this, I hear the use of those power chord elements there, the way that it kind of grinds away and there's those little bends and a ba-da-ba-da-bam-bam, how tight the bass line is underneath it, rolling with those root notes. The drums as well, mixing in those quarters, eighths and sixteenths with an incredibly sort of almost metronomic kind of display of capability there. And the fact that we kind of have just some really kind of intense sort of like these chords on the guitar, like during that verse part, that ba-na-na-na-na, these like either dominants or like, they're just higher power chords, aren't they? They're just higher range power chords. We kind of play with chromatics and amongst those on the tails there to kind of add a sense of angst. And I think that I was misremembering the heaviness relative of the chorus there. The mixture to the rides there is a good choice, I think, in the chorus section there, because it's a different tone to the hi-hats and helps to sort of segment those different parts on the percussion. We've got a wonderful array of different fills and chops there across the entire kit. from Dave Grohl. I think that moving back into the second verse the way that we did was a very smooth transition, and I like that we sort of didn't hesitate to go back into that. And there's like this kind of playfulness in terms of the bluesy layering and sort of like sequences and melodies from Kurt that coalesces neatly with those guitar parts. I think the crispiness of the guitar tone kind of actually gives it a sort of a vintage taste, if that makes sense. What I dig, alongside that visceral scream from Kurt after the second chorus going into that solo section, is that we have the lead guitar specifically on the right side, and it continues to perforate until like the halfway point where it skitters over to the other side. And I think that's interesting primarily because I hear very few guitar solos do that. It makes you wonder as you listen to it, why are they doing that? And that to me is the beauty of Nirvana in part, is because you listen to this and you're actively trying to figure out why, in part because of the effort that they put into making the music interesting to listen to. It's just such a sharp sound as well, with the kind of tremolo picking and stuff like that as well. I think it's fantastic. And there's like this kind of disharmony there, this chaotic kind of like discourse that almost reflects more sort of like aggression and disgust than the vocals do, because they're relatively polished in comparison. It almost feels like we've been saving our swear words for the solo section and we're doing it on the guitar instead. I think, past that solo section though, where it's just a fantastic old lead to Kurt's voice, you move into that outro part there, and we have a very succinct sort of chorus section that allows us to pause out, and you go back to that guitar only being on the right side, and then the track's done. And it's such a short track at 3 minutes. It seems very short because if you're enjoying yourself, time flies, but also because of how quick the track is. It's almost unbelievable that it is that short. It's just that you have those repeated verses, you have the choruses that are very sort of satisfying to go into with the different chord progressions, because there are different chord progressions per part. I think the adjustment for that chorus with the way that the bass lines and sort of power chords kind of handle themselves, and the difference in the vocal line and cadence helps to make that stand out. And then you almost have like an AABA section where it goes verse, chorus, like post-chorus, and then verse again. I think it was just great to have as well the solo section follow that similar initial pattern there, to kind of make it sit more into the mire and be an alternate to the verse part for the chorus to kind of fade us out again. Just very satisfying. Thematically though, with just a really well played performance across the guitar, bass and drums there, illustrating emotions and sort of musical ideas, both like in terms of lead and harmony that actively kind of like connect to the subject matter, I think, or at least our impressions or thoughts of it. There's just this minor Orion there with a blues scale included there that kind of adds a sense of sadness in amongst the furor, the feistiness of it. And it's an unforgiving track where it kind of rolls in the mire of its own low tune, kind of distorted, kind of like grizzled substance. It's a feral sounding track with a solid groove in terms of the percussion. I think that the vocals, you can kind of dance, you can sing along to those and kind of appreciate the energy and how bombastic it is. But I think that that's what kind of helps establish a sense of equilibrium in terms of the instrumental and sort of like the subject matter, is that, by itself, this subject matter is incredibly depressing, but you have things pushing forward, you have a lot of kind of like vigor in terms of the way things are portrayed from like layering and actual musical perspective. And it's sensational. And I think the lack of trying to commit to a set key signature or sort of scale in the solo section actually allows the track to sort of be more interesting in part, because of the fact that you don't have a commitment to like a typical solo melody like you would in a lot of typical more traditional solos. We're kind of going away from that. We're shoving things aside almost as if we're not trying to establish what's already been put in place. So effectively, again, thematically, really tight performance, wonderful, bass guitar and drums. Studio recording, mixing and mastering was fantastic. Again, I love the panning decisions I've mentioned, but I also thought that Kurt's vocals were well presented in the mix. The guitars, again, were crispy, well EQ'd there, nice sense of brightness overall in the mix. The bass and drums were well sort of featured in the mids to lows, and there was a punch from the kit general, a nice sort of control in terms of bus compression with the drums and the way they sort of like amalgamated with the guitar, bass, and vocals. Things were leveled neatly, music surround you in the headphones, again with the panning I mentioned as well being additional to that, and then it's nice and loud, a bus compression and limiting it handled. No applicable constructive critique for me. And from a final general listener's perspective, I'm thankful that Nirvana made such a variety of different tunes. You know, sometimes when I get sent grunge tracks to review from independent musicians, I find myself kind of gauging how close it is to their inspirations in terms of bands like Nirvana and stuff like that. And I just think that Nirvana, at the very least, have encouraged so many younger musicians or more sort of recent musicians to do their own thing with it, that I feel like it's been just a positive addition to the industry and ecosphere as a whole. But thank you very much for watching my review of this track from Nirvana Total Breed off of the Nevermind album. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the great stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reviews. Spider Hands out.